My name's Rish. I have been in the drinks industry for about 20 years now. Never tell, would you? I started my career at Diageo, went on to work for the Dalmore, it's a luxury whiskey, then worked on the launch of Seedlip, and then now I'm with the Pathfinder. So a mixture of alcoholic to start with, and then a few life choices and changes happened in 2016, which made me kind of want to leave the industry. But when the Seedlip launched this new category, it gave me the opportunity to stay in this amazing industry, but drink on my terms. So yeah, got to do alcoholic and non-alcoholic now. So yeah, best of both.
So you're still in the non-alc category, working with Pathfinder. So tell us a little bit about Pathfinder.
So I guess I'll talk a bit about Seedlip first, because Seedlip seems to really be the catalyst for a lot of non-alcoholic brands, and I've wanted to stay in non-alc ever since Seedlip because I can see the opportunity, the growth, consumer demand, and with the Pathfinder specifically, such a unique proposition. That's why I'm here. So ultimately, I was with Seedlip in 2017, kind of joined the team then, moved to Australia, and this was the first non-alcoholic spirit ever. Non-alcoholic beers have existed, but this was the first non-alc spirit. So going around and really trying to drive the category, build the category, was incredible. So it was only one product, one brand, Seedlip. We did have Acorn join as well, but it was predominantly Seedlip. That was the conversation that we were having with bars all over Asia Pacific. When that sold to Diageo, I then stayed in non-alc. I decided I wanted to stay in non-alc because I've fueled the growth of this category. This is where I want to stay, and it's about driving culture. So I've had conversations with bars and bartenders and buyers, and I really wanted to keep the momentum going because I've already had the first ever conversation they've ever had with non-alc, right? So fast forward, I'm in the UK and the Pathfinder lands on my desk. Now by this point I've got a little bit of non-alc fatigue, and the main reason was because there's a category. If you look at any other category, there's a lot of diversity in there. Bottle shapes, sizes, the colour of the bottles, the colour of the liquids, the brands. You've got brands like Sailor Jerry's. It's all about the ocean and tattoos. That's the identity. You've got brands like Smirnoff. When I worked at Diageo, Smirnoff, they did things like nightlife exchange, and it was about music and LGBTQI, and there was a brand identity. So all these brands have different personalities, but what I found with non-alc was it was very similar. A lot of the brands are very similar to Seedlip. So it's all talking about nature and botanicals, and that's where the fatigue came in. So I wanted to stay in this category, but I didn't want to be involved in just nature and botanicals. I wanted something else. So when I spoke to the founders, Chris and Guy at the Pathfinder, I'd had one eye on this in the US. It was going really well in the US, and it didn't look like any other non-alc brand. The packaging, the personality, the social media, all of it just screamed drinks brand. It wasn't, we are non-alc, we're apologetic about it, it's a fake version of something. There was none of that. It was the Pathfinder as its own entity. So I spoke to them, got to understand their backgrounds a little bit more, and then ultimately it was about trying a liquid. So ultimately I'm a bartender, I'd like to see myself as part of that bar world. And when I tried the liquid, I was like, right, everyone needs to try this. Everyone needs to know about this. There's nothing else like it around in terms of liquid. There's nothing else that exists like it. There's no other fermented and distilled hemp seed based spirit. It doesn't exist in the alc world or the non-alc world. This is the first of its kind. So I was really compelled to share that message and grow the awareness of not just the amazing liquid, but the brand as well. And that's how I've ended up working on the Pathfinder.
Was there anything that you had to change? Did you go into it and thought, oh yeah, it's going to be this, and then you had to quickly pivot?
You know what? Going into non-alc was such a no-brainer for me. And the frustration for me was I couldn't understand why all the buyers of retail or bars or whatever, I couldn't understand why they didn't get it straight away. Because I've always been mindful about my drinking habits. Ever since I was a kid, you know, a kid, 18, going to uni and stuff, I'd go months without drinking alcohol, which was kind of unheard of for uni students back at my time. But it was just about being mindful and conscious drinking, you know, habits, and being in tune with your body and your mind, and just paying yourself a bit of respect, you know. And I did that growing up. So when there was a tool, let's call this a tool, for bartenders to use to give consumers the best experience, hospitable experience, I think that is really key, is hospitality above everything else. If there's a tool to give your guests the best experience, why wouldn't you just jump at it? You know, I couldn't understand that. So the challenges came with building a category. You know, you've had your whiskies for hundreds of years, your vodkas, your gins, and there was an element of like, what is this? Is it just distilled water? And to an extent, you know, Rob, I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of brands out there, and some of them are just flavoured waters, right? But what makes them different is brands. Right? The brands with identity, they are the ones that build something greater, right? Because how many vodkas are there?
That's good, yeah.
Hundreds, thousands maybe. But it's the brand that we buy into, and the experiences that the brands offer us. So that was a challenge, you know, getting bars on board to understand that this is a new category. It's under this brand, and the brand has its own personality, but then how to use it. See, that's what was a bit of a challenge for me. It's like, because you don't just make alcoholic drinks the same with non-alcoholic spirits. It doesn't work that way. You've got to think differently. You've got to think creatively. And that was fun. You know, that was really fun, being able to work with bartenders going, what would you usually do? If I gave you a white rum, make a daiquiri, see how it goes. If I gave you a tequila, make a margarita, see how it goes. And I give you this non-alcoholic spirit, what are you going to do? And for them to start thinking completely differently was exciting. And now there's more and more products and brands out there. It should be fueling a lot more creativity and excitement, and I think it is for the category as a whole, because whilst there's some not great stuff out there, there's also incredible stuff out there as well.
Okay. And you spoke about maybe there being a little bit of fatigue from yourself in the non-alc market, but the guys at Pathfinder renewed your spirit. So what was it about them that, tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, amazing people, really, really great. So Guy Escombe, he saw the rise of non-alc, and he spent the majority of his career with Diageo. So he's done big brand building and marketing. And what he saw was that there was a gap. You know, why is everything, it's similar to me, why is everything nature and botanicals? Where's a brand with history and depth and passion and meaning and personality? So he was very much the brains behind creating the Pathfinder story. He connected with someone called Chris Abbott. Chris has got a cannabis business called Botanical in the US. So the idea, these two heads came together, and the idea initially was to create CBD and THC products. So Chris has access to hemp seed and cannabis. And the idea was, 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, what did we think the back bar would look like? We didn't think there would be as many non-alcoholic spirits in the bar as there is. And they're thinking, in the next 10 to 15 years, what's going to be on the back bar? We're looking at CBD, THC, mushrooms, kava, so many different types of spirits, none of them which contain alcohol. So the idea initially was to create CBD and THC products. And And then they pulled in the third head, Stephen Grass. Stephen Grass actually was the brand brains behind Hendrick's Gin and Sailor Jerry's. So there's, a lot of the branding and the creative all comes from Stephen and his team at QCM, and it's incredible. The bottle and the label and the personality is incredible, which is created by Stephen. So these are the three figureheads of the Pathfinder, and they ultimately decided that this doesn't need functionality. We don't need to try and convince the consumer that this is going to make them feel woo-woo with this chemical that we're going to put in the liquid. The brand identity can create that feeling of mysticism and provocativeness in itself as a brand. The liquid, however, needs to be absolutely incredible. So Guy had spent so much of his career working on whiskey. He wanted a liquid that would take your palate on a bit of a journey. So when you do try the liquid, it's got a little bit of a sweeter start, and then the mid palate is all very savoury. So you've got notes of Douglas fir, which is pine, sage, ginger, and then the finish is all bitter, so wormwood. So they've just used their years of experience, and they've put this all together in a brand called the Pathfinder with a liquid that is as good as the best spirits, in the world. And that's how the Pathfinder came to being. They launched in the US, in Seattle, in Capitol Hill, at a bar called Life on Mars. And it just kind of snowballed around Capitol Hill in Seattle. And ever since, it started to grow a little bit more across the US. And now we're in 7 or 8 states in the US, and that's growing. But they realise that the UK is probably the most sophisticated non-alcoholic market in the world. Credit to all the bars and the bartenders and the bottle shop, the buyers. Credit to everyone for getting behind the brand new category, because it's easy to say, I don't know what this is, I'm not sure about it, I don't want in. But the UK has been really liberal, really open-minded, really got behind this as a category. So they made the decision to launch in the UK, and my job is to get that going, I guess.
Okay, and so they have their distillery and everything is made in the US?
Yes, so we did actually make the first ever batch of the Pathfinder in the UK. So we did do that here, but the US is very much the home of the brand. So the hemp seed still comes out of Seattle, and the product is made and distilled over there. And once the Pathfinder's big enough in the UK, we'll be able to get production and operations happening in the UK as well.
Hemp seed and things like that, is there any issues around that? Was there any issues in trying to get it made, or is everything, you could just transport it anywhere?
Yeah, so it's the processes that the hemp goes through means that there's no CBD, no THC in this pretty much whatsoever. There's actually very, very, very little trace of hemp itself, because what we're trying to get out was the flavour. So that earthy flavour of hemp seed, which is why it goes for a fermentation process and then a distillation process. There isn't any hemp in the product, but you've got all the flavour characteristics of the hemp itself. So the process is long, it's complicated, it's difficult, but the end product is exciting, bitter, sweet and complex, which is why it's worth going through the process in order to get to the end result.
What are the kind of cocktails and what are the kind of drinks that you can make with this?
We have our signature serve, which is the Pathfinder Spritz, which is the Pathfinder, lemon and soda over ice with a wedge of lemon. But ultimately, Rob, you've got your mock and mimic brands, and then you've got your original brands, right? The good thing about the mock and mimic brands is the alcoholic versions already exist. So what tends to happen is bartenders try and create the alcoholic version with the non-alcoholic products. The beauty of original brands like the Pathfinder, the beauty is you can't get it wrong. So whatever you create is the real thing. You're not comparing it to the real thing. This is the real thing. So when it comes to serves and creating drinks and cocktails, the power is very much in your hands. It's in the consumer's hands, it's in the bartender's hands, because what you get out of the taste of this is your taste. You know, everyone's got a different palate. So what you taste, it might be really sweet to someone and a lot more bitter to someone else. So depending on who you are and the program of your bar, that's how you're going to lean your drinks towards that kind of style. So we've worked with bartenders on whiskey style cocktails, you know, old fashioned style cocktails, boulevardiers. We've got quite a few bars doing a take on a dark and stormy, you know, so doing your own twist on dark and stormy. So this isn't cognizant of rum, but it's leaning into that rum world. And then you've got the worlds of vermouths, and you know, we've got a Can Negroni in the US, so that leans into the world of vermouth. And then you've got Amaro style cocktails as well. You've got a bar in Soho doing a riff on a paper plane. So I think versatility is really important here, and having an original liquid means that whatever you make with it, it won't be wrong, as long as it's, you know, it looks good, it tastes great, it's well balanced. Dilution's really important. You know, if any bartenders are watching this, or anyone at home wants to play around with a Pathfinder, dilution's really important. You don't need to think about it in the same way you do alcohol, because you don't need to dilute like you would with alcohol. So, you know, if anyone wants me to come and hang out with them and make some drinks, let's absolutely do that. You've just got to think about this completely differently. Be open-minded and use this as a base. Use the flavours as a base to build your drink your way.
And how do you enjoy Pathfinder?
I actually drink it on its own over ice. That's my favourite way of drinking it, with an orange wedge. You know, I drink it like a whiskey. It scratches the itch for me whenever I need it. It's great.
And the liquid itself is interesting, but even more interesting and unique is your branding. So do you want to talk a little bit about the branding and the brains behind that?
Yeah, so I touched on the brains behind the branding with Stephen Grass. You know, so Stephen does the branding for Sailor Jerry's and Hendrick's Gin. And they wanted to create a brand which was interesting, fun, high energy. You know, I think non-alc has a reputation of being somewhat serious. You know, I think we lean too heavily into the health and well-being too much. So you've got health and well-being, you've got the seriousness of non-alcoholic, and it's, you know, it's got rules. Whereas the Pathfinder came along and was like, why? You know, drinking's supposed to be fun. It's a social environment that you're doing this in. So why not have a brand which speaks to high energy, high intensity? And that just doesn't exist in the world of non-alc. There's no like big energy brands. So Stephen created this brand of mysticism and intrigue, and Guy very much leans into that. Our founder Guy, he leans into that element of blazing new trails and being provocative and witty and sarcastic. You know, and it's just fun. Ultimately, I think it's really important. I can't stress this enough. Is that we work in hospitality, and it should be fun. We don't need to be at the bar calorie counting. You know, so please just go out there. If you go to a restaurant, get the starters, get the mains, and definitely get the dessert. You know, enjoy yourself. That's really important. So when you look at the label, you know, there's little cannabis leaves on the bottom in ode to our origins of cannabis. As I said, there's no CBD or THC in the product, but there's a node to that. There's also some really funny and witty claims. On the front it says immediate relief, malaise and ennui, you know, so it's saying that they're outlandish claims essentially, but again, we're having a laugh. You can't go to the doctor and say, I'm bored, what would you recommend? He'd probably say, go and get yourself some Pathfinder, that will solve all your problems of boredom. So the brand is very witty, sarcastic, fun, interesting, light-hearted, you know, and yeah, we invite bartenders and everyone and consumers alike to kind of just have fun with us. The other thing to really highlight with the Pathfinder as a brand is it's not a sober brand. We're not bashing alcohol. We're not saying alcohol's the devil or it's really bad for you. You shouldn't drink. We're saying if you want a non-alcoholic drink, which is delicious and it looks great, you have a Pathfinder. If you want a low ABV, so what we're seeing that low alcohol drinks are making huge waves at the moment. they still look good, they still taste great. There's a bit of alcohol, and alcohol is a great flavor, a carrier of flavor. So low ABV cocktails are really important and interesting right now as well. But also to be used as a modifier in alcoholic cocktails. You know, the best bartenders are looking at all of the tools available to them to make the most unique and best interesting serves for the end consumer. So yeah, we're really bridging the gap. The Pathfinder is bridging the gap between alc and non-alc like never seen before. So yeah, it's interesting, it's exciting.
And for you yourself, when you first went into non-alc to being in it now, how have you seen people's perceptions change to the non-alc category?
So people's perceptions of the non-alc category have drastically improved. However, I've talked a little bit about non-alc fatigue. I think there is a bit of that going around. I also think that some brands have leaned into becoming leaned into the business of being an alcoholic brand too quickly. So this is where I'm talking about things like exclusivity. You know, in order for us, everyone, to be able to have a diverse experience with non-alcoholic, they have to have a diverse range of options. If I said to you, Rob, you can have a gin and tonic, but you only ever have one gin and one tonic. And the reason is because that gin and tonic brand have paid that bar to say you cannot work with anyone else, right? That's happening in non-alc. But what that means is if you don't love that gin or that tonic, you don't have any other options. So the big alc companies of the world, they've been doing this for years. And I'm surprised that this is happening in non-alc so quickly. The gin boom would never have happened if the category didn't grow with craft and so many different options. So if we're prohibiting the bars from having lots of different options and letting the end consumer decide, let them choose their best experience, you know, let them make the choice. And I think if brands ultimately truly believe in their products and their brand, they won't care whether there's 500 different non-alcs in the back bar, because they've done enough to convince bars, bartenders and consumers that their product and their brand is the best. You know, so I think that's actually one of the biggest hindrances now, is that there's a lot of choices out there for bartenders to choose from, but the business of non-alc is limiting what they can actually put on the bar. And I'm hoping that starts to unravel a little bit, and we allow bartenders the choice to choose what they want, choose the brands and the liquids that they really want to work with. So I'm hoping that comes back a little bit more. But on the whole, the attitude towards the category is incredible. You know, I'd say 8 out of 10 people, when we first launched Seedlip, 8 out of 10 people would say, go away, this will never take off. I'd probably say it's the other way around now, where 2 out of 10 will say, non-alc's not a thing. You know, we don't believe in it and we're pushing back. We don't want to be a part of it. But 8 out of 10 people will still, bartenders, bars, they'll say, yeah, the category is really important. It's important for their social responsibility as well. You know, having not just a non-alc option, but great non-alc options is really important for them as their bar brand or their restaurant brand, to cater for everyone, you know. And I think 15 years ago, there weren't as many vegetarian, vegan, gluten, dairy options on the menu, whereas they are now. So from 2016-17, when we launched Seedlip, to today, we now have a variety of beers, wines and spirits which are non-alcoholic, which cater for everyone's needs. And bartenders are now approaching their bar program in the same way that chefs approach their menus. So I think the category's come a long way. I think it's got really big really quickly. I think there's a lot of products, a lot of brands in there, but slowly we'll start to realise that there'll be the few that stick there, as they'll always be there. And Rob, the business of non-alc isn't easy. You know, it's not easy running a non-alcoholic business and all the complexities that come with it. So in order to be able to grow and scale, and you know, you've got to get so you got to have some support and some investment to be able to get out there and buy enough bottles and labels and put the word out there, really.
The bottle reminds me of those old days of snake oil, you know, with the label and the bottle. So that's an interesting on the back bar.
Yeah, it really stands out. You know, the bottle stands out a lot, and it looks like an old apothecary bottle. And we call ourselves the snake oil salesman. You know, we're telling each bartender about this, or telling the chefs about this, and, you know, don't tell anyone that this exists. And they're drinking it, going, "This is amazing! I've never tasted anything like it." You know, so there's a bit of our, as I said, our brand personality is very much like that. And the botanicals themselves come from the Oregon Trail. So the brand, the look and the feel comes from that kind of Wild West look and feel, going from saloon to saloon. That's the atmosphere, and that's the personality that we've created.
And also with that, pushing that as well, is that your tagline, the destroyer of bad vibes? The
destroyer of bad vibes. It's really funny. The destroyer of bad vibes, I think, came around because, as I said, non-alc really leans into a lot of health and well-being and low level, and there's definitely a demand for it, definitely a space for it. And I can understand why non-alc goes hand in hand with, low level occasions, Sunday to Wednesday. But the destroyer of bad vibes came around because whilst everyone else is saying good vibes only, we're out there using negative language to create a positive world. So, you know, again, this just goes back to our tongue-in-cheek sarcasm and witty, you know, light-hearted nature.
And I saw that there's a Negroni in a can. Is that in the States, or is that coming over here? What have you got planned?
So there is a Negroni in a can which just launched. It's going really well in the US. We have only just launched the Pathfinder in the UK in January 2025. So there's still a way for us to go in order to build a bit of awareness about our product, why we exist, and the gap, you know, the problem that we're solving in that non-alc space. Well, no, low and full strength space. So once we've got a bit more awareness of our brand, that's when we can launch the can Negroni. And there's also some exciting news coming out of the US, so that there might be a few more interesting bits of production that are coming out in the next couple of months as well.
Okay. I remember that you were saying before that there's the merchandise is very special over there in the US.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got, you know, our roots go back to cannabis, so we've got things like rolling trays over there, which is quite funny. We've got matches made up. And also just that American look and feel of that, you know, the old apothecaries, you know. So we do have some great merchandise and bags, t-shirts, stickers, pens, you know, very bartender heavy kind of pin badges, limited edition pin badges. So that's really leaning into the bartender space. And ultimately, this is a bartender brand. And the way that people are going to hear about this is by drinking it in bars. So bartenders really love this liquid. They love the look of the brand, and we make sure that they get enough merchandise to go and shout about it and stick on their laptop or whatever they want to do as well.
Okay. So it's early days for you guys. So what do you see over the next 12 months in the UK?
Okay. So the US is going really well. There's a lot of momentum in the US. I don't think the US is as saturated as the UK market. So I think that the Pathfinder's gone a little bit bigger in the US because there's less, I guess, competition. But in the UK, it's slightly different. You know, there's a lot of products, a lot of brands in the UK from all around the world. As I said, it's the most sophisticated non-alcoholic market in the world. So there's a lot of noise in the non-alc space in the UK. But over the next 12 months, we will start to work with a lot of the best bartenders and chefs and a lot of the best venues in the country. And that's how other bars and bartenders are going to start to learn about what we're doing. And once they try the liquid, they'll be hooked.
Okay. And so where can we try the liquid? I guess it's on your website and some bars?
Yeah. So we've got a list of locations on our website. If you go on pathfinder.co.uk, drinkthepathfinder.co.uk. some of the best bars in London we're working with. We had a drink at Satan's Whiskers, and they're huge fans. You know, Kev Armstrong, he's probably the first person in the UK to really try the liquid and get behind the Pathfinder, because it's, you know, he said it's probably the best non-alc that he's tried, and he never had a non-alc on his menu ever. But the first night he put this on, he sold 5 Pathfinder drinks, and it stayed on ever since. And now we're getting more creative with the cocktails and the serves that we're working with them on. Places like Gothic Bar that we're in now, you know, they've got a bottle on the bar. You've got places like Archive and Myth. In Manchester, you've got Blinker, Stray, and then some of the hotels, you've got like Claridge's, the Beaufort Bar at the Savoy. So it's quite varied. You know, we've got the high-end hotels, and then we've got a Michelin star restaurant. We've got Luca in Farringdon, for example, and then you've got bartender bars as well, like Gothic that we're sitting in.
Okay. That's it. Anything else you want to say?
I think it's really important to say our team is very diverse, and again, that's intentionally. We have such a variety of personalities, male, female, and everything in between in the US. And as we grow in the UK, we'll be sticking to that, and we're looking to grow a diverse team, because that's where you get realness, you know. Yeah, we're just here to destroy bad vibes and have a good time.